This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the Talkstar Radio Network and the X-Zone Broadcast Network, and our growing family of broadcast affiliates across Canada, the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific Rim, Australia, Asia, India, Africa, and right across Europe. If you'd like to give us a call, toll-free worldwide, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is William Federer, and what would any major holiday be without William coming onto the show to tell us the true story behind the myth, or the legend, or the folklore. You know, we're going to be talking about his best-selling book, St. Patrick, the real history of his amazing life from tragedy to triumph this hour with William. And for more information on William Federer, www.americanminute.com. So tell me, Bill, who was St. Patrick? Was he a leprechaun? And why is Ireland best known for good old St. Patrick? And welcome back to the show. Always great having you with us.
Oh, it's great to be with you. Well, Charles Dickens, he wrote a child's history of England, and in there he says, talking about the time that Patrick went over to Ireland, he says, the Irish were at that time a barbarous people. As you can well imagine, they were continually quarreling and fighting and cutting one another's throats and slicing one another's noses and burning one another's houses and so forth. And then he gets into telling the story about Patrick going over there and evangelizing. Well, a little background, that the time Patrick lived was the fall of the Roman Empire. This huge Roman Empire that had existed for 1,000 years, from really 753 BC to 476 AD. The Roman Empire was falling. It was the old saying, Rome fell from the inside, but it was it lost its patriotism, it lost its ideals, and it was being overrun with illegal immigrants. They were the Ostrogoths and Visigoths and Anglos and Saxons and Jutes and Lombards, a lot of our ancestors. And as they came across these tribes, learned the Latin language and would assimilate and work as servants. But then they began to come across so fast that they didn't have time to learn the Latin language, and they kept their own German, French, and Anglo languages, and that broke up the unity of the Roman Empire. Meanwhile, Rome had to put its military around the world to put out these global fires of all these invasions, and they had a small, high-tech military that could move very quickly on their Roman road system. It was like their version of the Air Force, but they couldn't sustain long and drawn-out engagements, and so it created a huge amount of debt. And so Rome was crumbling under this huge debt, and so they had to raise taxes. And when they were raising taxes, it got so bad that one historian said the tax collector was worse than the barbarian. So you get the tax from one side by the barbarians, and you get attacked from the other side by the tax collector. And then they had outsourced all their grain production to North Africa. That was the grain basket. And when one of the tribes that overran the Roman Empire, the Vandals, they went through Spain, they captured North Africa, and they captured the grain fields and brought Rome to its knees. In other words, you could not wage an attack because they didn't have the resources. They didn't have the food. Sort of like today, America's outsourced everything to China.
Yeah.
And imagine if China gets upset at us supporting Taiwan, at least America, and the Chinese, all they have to do is hold their ships back for 3 months, and all of our Walmart shelves will go empty. And our entire retail industry will grind to a halt, and everybody will say, look, give them Taiwan, just get the economy going again.
Bill, stand
And,
by.
that's
We've got to
what's
take our break. We'll be right back. William Federer is our special guest. We're talking about St. Patrick's. And, of course, we're getting ready for St. Patrick's Day in 2 days. After all, this is the X Zone. I'll be back with William Federer. www.americanminute.com. Don't go away.
This is Kevin Randall. For nearly 30 years, I have been investigating the case of the Roswell UFO. I have interviewed hundreds of people and stood on the crash site. Now in Roswell in the 21st century, I have reviewed dozens of hours of audio and videotaped interviews, examined hundreds of files that relate to the crash, and have returned to Roswell in an attempt to put all that information into the proper perspective. For the first time in Roswell in the 21st century, I have made a dispassionate reevaluation of all that material and provide a new look at what happened. This is a book that clears away all the clutter that has hidden the truth for so long, strips away the various lies that surround the case, exposes the Air Force attempts at cover-up, and found a core of solid information that tells us all where the case stands today. Roswell in the 21st century will be available in just a few weeks. For more information, please visit my website at www.kevinrandall.blogspot.com.
Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at www.drgibbswilliams.com.
Shamanism is recognized as a method to access the quantum level. Mastery of shamanic skills puts spiritual information and healing power into your hands. Path Home Shamanic Art School, a bonded Colorado certified occupational school, has met rigorous state standards ensuring its director and instructors have the qualifications to teach the shamanic arts. Path Home offers its certification program in blocks of study. Block 1, a 5-day intensive, will be held in the beautiful mountain town of Coaldale, Colorado, October 13th through 18th. Registration deadline is September 12th. Experience journey trance, power animals, helping spirits, sacred space, and life purpose. Come discover your power. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, in the magical world of shamanism. Call 303-775-3431 or visit findyourpathhome.com.
With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted William at Federer is our special guest. We're talking whentechfails.com, about St. Patrick. And author-signed copies may be
Monday,
purchased
March
at
15th edition of the X Zone. 2 more days, and it's St. Patrick's
That's
Day.
www.wentechfails.com
there have been parades across Canada and the United States. I didn't know there were so many Irish people over in the Americas, but I guess, well, everybody wants to be Irish come St. Patrick's Day. www.xzoneradiotv.com.
is our website. If you'd like to send an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. And our toll-free worldwide number, 1-800-610-7035. All right, Bill, so we've got the to the point where the Romans had overextended themselves, and now they're raising taxes. And all right, and they're using their roads, like you said, as we would use our modern day air forces to get from one point to the next. So what happens next in history?
Well, terrorist attacks. Attila the Hun, wiping out whole cities in Europe, and as a result, Rome had to pull its legions back from the frontiers to protect the city of Rome. And so Britain, which was a Roman colony, was left unprotected. Now, Britain had been a Roman colony really since Julius Caesar. He's the first one from Rome to invade Britain, and they always had fights and struggles, but there was always Roman settlements there. And once the Roman legions pulled out, different marauding bands began to invade and carry away thousands as slaves and kidnap them. And so Patrick, which was a name for a nobleman, Patricus is the name for nobleman, we know he was from a well-to-do family, and he was kidnapped. And they think it probably was around 405 A.D., a little bit of different disagreements on the exact date, but he was carried away as a slave to Ireland. And Ireland was ruled by the Druids. The Druids had, amongst their different beliefs, they believed the woods were filled full of spirits, which later came down to us as leprechauns. But these sprites, elves, poltergeists, demons, whatever they're called, they always needed to be appeased. And so sometimes the appeasing was human sacrifice. And so the Druids were a little bit bloodthirsty there. Halloween came from the Druids. The idea of trick-or-treats, and you have to appease the spirit, otherwise a trick will happen. You have to put a jack-o'-lantern with an ugly face to keep away the demon spirits, try to... this is where Patrick was a slave for 6 years. They would chop off the heads of their enemies and put them on poles around their little villages. They'd use skulls for goblets, and do shrunken head stuff, and it was a pretty scary place. But here's Patrick. He begins to remember the Christian faith of his parents. And how do we know this? Well, he wrote his confession. Later in life, after Patrick did all of his stuff, he gets asked by the church leadership in Britain to come back for a little investigation, sit-down talk. Like church politics, they still have it today. Well, Patrick refuses to go. They had accused him of not being a believer when he was a young boy. Well, in his confession, he says, "Look, I'm not going to go. I'll write my life story. That's my confession." And in there, he testifies that he was not a believer when he was kidnapped. And it only was later, when he was a slave, he said that he began to pray. And he prayed as many as 100 times a day, through this frost, through rain, through snow, up in the mountains while he was tending sheep. And then he would fast. And then he says the Lord began to speak to him through an inner monition in his heart. And he talked about how one night he was asleep and he had a dream. And he heard a voice saying to him, "Your ship is ready." And he awoke, and he says it was not near, but it was 200 miles away. But he believed the dream. He left, and sure enough, there was a boat there where they were putting wolfhounds on it to take to Europe to sell as hunting dogs. And the sailor said, "Well, you can come with us if the dogs will mind you." And sure enough, the dogs get real peaceful around Patrick, and so he gets a boat ride, and it got caught in a storm, and the boat was shipwrecked in Gaul, Gaul, which is southern France. And then he hitchhikes his way across Europe, and lots of stories. The group of sailors he was with, they'd gotten into an area that had just been ransacked by the Visigoths, and there wasn't any food. And they turned to Patrick and say, "Well, you say this God of yours answers prayer. Why don't you pray for us?" And Patrick prays, and a herd of pig goes across the road, and they eat for 3 days. And then Patrick says that they decided they wanted to make him a slave, because here's a guy that can, pray and have pigs come.
Yeah.
And so finally, after a couple months, he escapes from them. Long story short, he gets back to Britain, and it's fairly uneventful until he turns 40 years old. And we're thinking now it's around 430 A.D., and Patrick says that he has another dream. And he writes in his confession, he says, "In the depth of the night, I saw a man named Victoricus coming as if from Ireland with innumerable letters. And he handed one to me, and as I read the heading, it ran, 'The Cry of the Irish, I thought I heard at that moment the voice of those who were beside the wood of Folkleth on the western sea, crying out, "Please, holy boy, come and walk among us again." He said, "Their cry pierced to my very heart. I could sleep no more, so I awoke." Well, he took this as a divine call to go to Ireland as a missionary. Sort of like that story of the Apostle Paul in Acts, where he has a dream of a guy saying, "Come over to Macedonia."
Mm-hmm.
Well, Patrick goes over to Ireland, and again around 430. This is the time that the Roman Empire is being overrun by all these different Huns, and he goes to the chieftain where he had been a slave. He was intending to give him a price to pay for his freedom, but he gets there, the place is burnt out and destroyed because of a battle with another tribe. So had he not escaped, he probably would have been killed. But he is very courageous. His version of evangelism was what's called top-down. He would boldly go into the smoky den of these Druid chieftains and proclaim the gospel to them in their own language, and which he had learned while he had been a slave. And so the first one, he goes in. You could imagine the story, but all the noise and the singing and the goblins, skulls of goblins.
Time, yeah.
I mean, this is pretty. And he gets there, the place quiets down. Like, what's this stranger doing coming in here? And he's unarmed, and the Druids want to kill him, but the king's like, wait a second, this guy's obviously got courage, and he's speaking our language, and we don't get visitors here this often. Let him talk. And he talks, and the king's fascinated by him and gives him a plot of land, and he builds his first church. And that sort of became his outpost there. And there was about 30 chieftains across Northern Ireland, and he works on evangelizing them. But the Druids didn't take this sitting down, and they tried at least a dozen times to try to kill Patrick. Patrick said, "Daily I expect murder, fraud, captivity." He talks about the poison shaft and the wizard's evil spell, and there's a prayer that he wrote that is called the breastplate of Patrick, and in there he talks about that the Lord would deliver him from this is the prayer. He goes, "I bind into myself today the strong name of the Trinity by invocation of the same, 3 in 1, 1 in 3. He says, "I bind this day to me forever the power of faith, Christ's incarnation, his baptism in the Jordan River, his death on the cross for my salvation, his bursting from the spiced tomb, his riding up the heavenly way, his coming on the day of doom. I bind unto myself today." And he goes on to talk about the angels protecting him against all Satan's spells and wiles, against false words of heresy, against the knowledge that defiles, against the heart's idolatry, against the wizard's evil craft, against the death wound and the burning, the choking wave, the poisoned shaft. Protect me, Christ, till thy returning. Sort of reminds you of walking through a scary neighborhood at nighttime, and through an alley downtown. But here he was a man of faith, and he one story is he was captured and held in chains for 2 weeks, and then the Lord delivered him. Another time, a chieftain had an ambush set for Patrick in a valley, and they waited with soldiers to kill him, and all day long the only thing they saw go through the valley was a deer. Yet the next day Patrick was on the other side of the valley. And so that's why the Patrick's prayer is sometimes called the deer's cry. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ within me, Christ to comfort, Christ above me, Christ beneath me, in mouth of friend and stranger. But the story that you can't forget to tell when you're talking about Patrick is the contest at Tara, T-A-R-A. This Druid chieftain had and again, there was about 30 chieftains across Northern Ireland. This chieftain's tradition was every year the people had to extinguish their fires in their hearths, their fireplaces in their little homes, and they would bring a gift or a sacrifice to the Druid priests to get coals to relight their fire for the next year. And the king would kill anybody that did not extinguish his fire. Well, Patrick goes to the top of a hill and lights a huge fire, and they, all the people in the plain are saying, "Wait a second, how come we have to extinguish fires and that guy doesn't?" And so the 6th century historian Marucci says that the king ordered 27 chariots to go up and kill Patrick, and it says that seeing the impious heathen were about to attack him, Patrick rose and said clearly in a loud voice, "May God come and scatter his enemies, and may those that hate him flee from his face." And this is what it says in that 6th century historian Marucci. He says, by this disaster caused by Patrick's curse in the king's presence, because the king's order, 7 times 7 men fell, and the king, driven by fear, came on bent knee before the holy man. And anyway, it goes on to say, the next day, in a display of magic, a druid invoked demons and brought about a dark fog on the land. Patrick said to the druid, cause the fog to disperse. The druid wasn't able to do it. Patrick prayed and gave his blessing, and suddenly the fog cleared and the sun shone. And then it goes on to say, and through Patrick's prayers, the flames of fire consumed the druid. Now, it's sort of hard to decipher what was fact and legend, but nevertheless, this is what they had written. And it says, the king was enraged at Patrick because of the death of his druid. And Patrick said to the king, if you do not believe, you will die on the spot, for the wrath of God descends on your head. And the king summoned his council and said, it is better for me to believe than to die. And so he converted. And of course, when a king would convert, his followers would. And but it's sort of like, it brings up reminiscence of Moses, the story of him throwing down his staff and turns into a serpent.
There are a lot of similarities to Christian stories within the story of St. Patrick, and we even look at the problems that we are having today with terrorism. So, Bill, it seems that history has kept on repeating itself throughout history. You and I have to take our commercial break with the news at the bottom of the hour. We'll be back on the other side of the news. William Federer is our special guest, www.americanminute.com. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.
It was a terrifying experience.
I thought we was going to go to jail for murder.
That day, we were a little behind, so we worked until it was starting to get dark.
We loaded up the equipment and hadn't driven very far when we caught glimmers of this glow coming through the trees. I urged Mike to hurry up and get up there.
Travis had the door open before we even stopped. As he got closer, I heard the sound.
One of the guys said, "You feel that?"
I really panicked then.
I told him, "Get the hell out of here."
It didn't come directly to me, it came to a deputy sheriff.
I was volunteered right away to tell him what had happened.
Sheriff Gillespie definitely didn't believe it.
He says that we better be certain because we can get in a lot of trouble.
When we went to search the next day, they split us up, and the whole time the deputies asked me, if you just tell us where the body is, we can all go home and get this over with.
We're talking about 100 people combing through the wooded area. Nothing turns up.
All week long, I've been hearing they're going to set it up to make you guys look guilty.
We're a rough-looking bunch then. Some of us have been in trouble with the law before.
And y'all ain't never going to come out of that jailhouse.
We couldn't get out.
I tried to sneak out the back door the day of the polygraph test. I was scared to death.
On top of that, you have media.
I literally would be on 2 telephones at the same time.
We've even got some coops in here now that's coming in and out to see the freak show, as they call it.
Everyone descends.
I just wasn't going to stand there and listen to it anymore.
Granny says, "This is Travis. I'm back. I need help."
When I did hear that he had been returned, it was almost as unbelievable as the original thing.
I just looked at my mom and says, "I told you we didn't kill him."
Travis Walton reappeared after several days with a bizarre story about a ride in an unidentified flying object.
People were desperate to explain it away.
Why are you sticking up with Travis for all this time? You know this really didn't happen.
What happened to Travis after we took off in that truck, I can't tell you.
I hated Travis for a long time after this. My whole world just tore up.
But I believe every word Travis said about it. He's never lied to me about nothing.
It's a net negative. We lost our jobs in the immediate aftermath.
And now you're not able to talk about it with anyone because you know that they're going to laugh at you, they're going to look at you like you're crazy.
But if you don't come out and tell your story, somebody else is going to tell it for you.
There's a degree of responsibility. Certainly I have to accept the bad. If I can direct what's happened in a way that I can make something good happen in the world, I'm looking for it.
Order your copy of Travis, The True Story of Travis Walton, today at www.traviswaltonthemovie.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, High Tech with Corey Kay, and every minute of the 24/7, 365 programming of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 712-432-9459, courtesy of TalkStream Live. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 712-432-9459 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 712-432-9459 for the best of paranormal, new age, thought-provoking, sci-fi radio programming 24/7, 365.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we'll weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic right here on the Mutual Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Welcome back, everyone. William Federer is my special guest, www.americanminute.com. William is the author of many books, but we're talking about St. Patrick, the real history of his amazing life from tragedy to triumph. And once again, William's website is www.americanminute.com. So, William, it's very, very plain to see that St. Patrick has had one heck of a life. He's been a slave. He has faced his challenges dead on, and as you were saying, he never used a weapon.
Oh, right. Now he did courageously go across in all these different situations where he could have been killed, but the history books say that he found Ireland heathen and left it Christian, that he baptized 120,000 people and started 300 churches. And sort of interesting, he was always self-conscious that he had been kidnapped before he finished his education. We sort of chuckle thinking of that today. It's like, oh, but all the church leaders at the time were in Rome writing these deep theological works in Latin, and he spoke in the language of the people. He was just a common guy, and that ended up turning out to be one of the keys to his success, because he could talk in a way that people understood it. For example, he used the three-leaf clover to teach the Trinity. Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, three in one. That's why they always have the three-leaf clover, associated with St. Patrick. And but he was one that was never discouraged and always come back to the call that was upon his life. When we look at this, that contest at Tara, where he's on top of it, today, people do go on a pilgrimage to the top of this hill, and they have they have a chapel there for a while, and then they have a statue of Patrick up there, and it's called Croag Patrick, or the Hill of Patrick, and he baptized those 120,000, and the 300 churches that Patrick started were independent. Again, Rome was being invaded by all these heathen hordes, and the last thing they thought about was this outback island on the other side of the world, as far as they're concerned. And so these were very independent, and they were like little communities. There would be a little stone wall around their little village and little stone huts, and then they had a tower in the middle with the door to the tower about 20 feet in the air with a ladder. And the different marauding bands would attack the little village, and everybody they'd ring a bell, climb up the ladder, and pull the ladder up behind them. You had to make sure you were there when they did it. And then these, bands with Viking-type peoples would pillage and burn and steal for a couple of weeks, and then they'd leave. And the people would put the ladder down, climb down out of the tower, and rebuild. And but Patrick, in the next century, it was those churches that sent missionaries back to Europe to convert those heathen hordes. There was an interesting story of one of Patrick's followers was named Columba, sort of like the detective guy a while back. But Columba was an Irish missionary, and he had snuck into a neighboring monastery and stole some scriptures and spent like a year hand copying them, and then snuck it back in there. And when it was discovered, the chieftain of that one castle demanded that the copy be given back to him, like that they possessed it or something. And the other chieftain said, no, we're not going to give it back. And a fight started and a battle started and a bunch of people died. And this Columba guy felt so bad that what he thought was a good thing ended up causing people to die, that he banished himself to the island of Iona, a little rock outcropping in between Ireland and England. The guy used a rock for his pillow, would eat clams, and he gathered around himself a bunch of followers, and they were very austere. They memorized all 150 Psalms and recited them all day long. But they sent missionaries into England and converted the Scots and the Picts, and then the Anglos and the Saxons. And then another missionary named Columbanus from Ireland went into Europe, and he started 100 mission outposts, which turned into monasteries as far south as northern Italy, which began to convert these heathen hordes that had overrun the Roman Empire. So it sort of came full circle here. And I wrote a book, and the title of my book is St. Patrick, the real story of his amazing life from tragedy to triumph. But in my book, I quote from Thomas Cahill's book, How the Irish Saved Civilization. So it's this idea that, when Rome was invaded and the Roman culture was, destroyed, and the Germanic tribes were, Thor was where we get Thursday, and Woden was the Germanic god where we get Wednesday, and they brought their Germanic cultures, but Ireland was the place where the Greco-Roman Judeo-Christian civilization was preserved for a century, and then it was the Irish monks that reseeded it back into Europe. And
so, Bill, who was it who decided to make Patrick a saint, and when did that happen?
Well, good question. It was in 664 that the Roman Catholic Church had, the invading tribes had finished their invasion, and then they began to be converted. And then is when Europe, the Merovingian Empire, and then later the Carolingian with, Charles Martel and Charlemagne. But this was just prior to that, so this is the Merovingian time. But these different, empires were being formed, and they were turning Christian. Well, that's when Rome sent a missionary back to England. His name was Saint Augustine. Now, not the Saint Augustine that was real popular, that wrote the City of God and his Confessions and, from Hippo, North Africa. This is a different Saint Augustine. But he comes to the king of Northumbria and tries to, talk him into submitting their English, Scottish, and Irish Christianity to the Roman Catholic Church. And they didn't want to, because the Irish had a different date for Easter. Now, we think of what a minor thing, the date of Easter, but that contest at Tara that I told you about,
yes,
that occurred the night before Easter. And that was when a huge tribe converted, and so that was like their 4th of July, their anniversary date. And so the big sticking point was on the date of Easter. Finally, the king of Northumbria conceded, and that's when the Irish Church and the English came under the Catholic dominion, and that's when Patrick was given the title of saint. And but one interesting thing, my dad's an attorney, and he's a writer and has written several novels and books, and he talks about how that Patrick had codified the laws of Ireland, that the Druids, remember them? The guys that did the human sacrifice?
Yep.
They were also the bards, B-A-R-D-S. They were the ones who would go from city to city and sing the laws of the people. And it was all oral, which wasn't uncommon. I mean, the Greeks had Homer reciting the Iliad and the Odyssey, and the blind guy that was all oral. But anyway, these Druids were called Brehons, which is where we get the word Brian. And so they would be singing the laws, and when they would convert, they would sing the gospel. And as I mentioned, they would memorize like all 150 Psalms and sing them, and they'd have these huge choirs, and they'd talk about how the angels of heaven would bend down to listen to the Irish sing, and the harp became the symbol of Ireland, and they would, powerful choirs you could hear from huge distances away, and they'd, as far as the law part of it, they decided that wherever the Brehon law was different from the Judeo-Christian, Mosaic, all the different laws from the Bible, that they would submit the Brehon law to the Christian law. And so this one king decided, he asked Patrick, and Patrick got 6 people. 2 were the king's people, 2 were Christian legal people, and then 2 were the experts on the Druid Brehon law. And they spent a long time, and they finally compiled what's called the Code of Patrick. All kinds of things like the 5 different kinds of land ownership. The king's land, the peasant's land, the common land,
right,
this and that, how to carry about transactions. And so when these Irish missionaries went to England and evangelized the Scots and the Picts, and then into Europe, they brought with them the gospel, but also the Code of Patrick. And so this became the basis for English common law. And this is what Alfred the Great codified in England. And then, of course, America is based on English common law. And so here Patrick even had an influence on the laws that we have in America. So, just think about, here we are 1,600 years later, still remembering this guy Patrick. And you think what you and I would have to do to have them remember us with a day 1,600 years into the future.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
But it's a fascinating story.
Where did the myth come from then, William, that St. Patrick, chased all the snakes out of Ireland? Were the snakes? Is that a metaphor for all the for all the non-believers?
Well, that's one of the interpretations, either that or the demons that he chased out. But people point out that there are no snakes in Ireland today. It's too far north, and the climate's too cold. But prior to around 1300, it was warmer back then. 1300 all the way through the 1600s is what's called the Little Ice Age. And, the Vikings, Leif Erikson had settlement in Newfoundland. But the growing season kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter until finally they had to abandon the settlements. In other words, they had a global cooling. So Al Gore would have had a fit back then because the whole world was getting colder and colder, and European populations were migrating further south. And even Thomas Jefferson, who, in addition to writing the Declaration, he kept a journal of the temperature every day. I mean, even in July 4, 1776, he writes in his diary, this is the temperature, this is the wind direction, this is the barometer reading. And he would count the number of days that there would be snow on the ground. And from when he first started doing this in the early 1700s all the way through his death, he says that the average winter has 15 less days per snow with snow than prior. So he documented that that is when this Little Ice Age was ending. So anyway, the idea is that back when Patrick lived, it was warmer in those northern latitudes, which means there could have been snakes, and he could have driven them out, but there's no way to know for certain.
William Federer is our special guest. www.americanminute.com. That's www.americanminute.com. So we've got St. Patrick, who was basically a self-taught missionary for Christianity, and he certainly followed the ways of St. John the Baptist. Baptizing thousands of people. What do we know about the results of his turn to Christianity? Because once again we hear so many times, William, that people who are incarcerated in jails, they find Christ and they learn religion, and they all of a sudden they're believers. Was his conversion to Christianity because of his parents, or was this an act of desperation on his part?
Good question. He in his confession, he gives us a little bit of an insight. He talks about his mother, named Conchessa, who was a Celtic Christian, that she taught him to pray, but he mentions by his own admission that he did not believe. He, at one point, he says, "I, Patrick, a sinner, most unlearned, and the least of all the faithful, and utterly despised by many. My father was Calpurnus, a deacon, son of Pontius, a Christian priest of the village of Bonneverne, Tambernay." And there's debates as to where exactly that was. He had and then so it goes on to continue, the father had a county seat and was a judge, and he says, "And there I was taken captive. I was about 16 years of age. I did not know the true God. I was taken into captivity in Ireland with many thousands of others, and deservedly so, because we turned away from God and did not keep his commandments." He continues, he says, "As a youth, nay, almost as a boy, not able to speak, I was taken captive before I knew what to pursue and what to avoid." So he was one that it was while he was there as a slave that he says, "And the Lord brought over me the wrath of his anger, and scattered us among the nations, even unto the uttermost parts of the earth, where now my littleness is placed among strangers." And then he says that the Lord began to open his sense of unbelief, and the fear of God came to me more and more. My faith was strengthened. My spirit was moved, so that in a single day I would say as many as 100 prayers, and almost as many at night.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, High Tech with Corey Kay, and every minute of the 24/7, 365 programming of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 712-432-9459, courtesy of TalkStream Live. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 712-432-9459 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 712-432-9459 for the best of paranormal, new age, thought-provoking, sci-fi radio programming 24/7, 365.
Coming soon to the X-Zone Broadcast Network is A Different Perspective with me, Kevin Randall, as your host. We'll be taking a close look at what is happening in the world of UFOs today with side trips into the paranormal. Guests will range from those who are household names to those who have a different perspective on a variety of topics. No topic will be taboo, but there will be tough questions asked as we all search for the truth about UFOs, the paranormal, and those things that excite us. Sometimes we'll agree with a guest and sometimes we won't, but we'll try to keep the program topical. For those of you who would like to read, be sure to visit www.kevinrandall.blogspot.com and remember to listen to the other fine programs on the X-Zone Broadcast Network at www.xzbn.net. This is Kevin Randall. For nearly 30 years, I have been investigating the case of the Roswell UFO. I have interviewed hundreds of people and stood on the crash site. Now in Roswell in the 21st century, I have reviewed dozens of hours of audio and videotaped interviews, examined hundreds of files that relate to the crash, and have returned to Roswell in an attempt to put all that information into the proper perspective. For the first time in Roswell in the 21st century, I have made a dispassionate reevaluation of all that material and provide a new look at what happened. This is a book that clears away all the clutter that has hidden the truth for so long, strips away the various lies that surround the case, exposes the Air Force attempts at cover-up, and found a core of solid information that tells us all where the case stands today. Roswell in the 21st century will be available in just a few weeks. For more information, please visit my website at www.kevinrandall.blogspot.com.
What Happened in Benghazi is revealed by Nicholas Genix, author of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. He informs the American people that President Obama deceived them by advocating a strong foreign policy prior to the 2012 presidential election, and Hillary Clinton supported this deception. As the title infers, there is a connection between Obama, Islam, and Benghazi. Ample evidence informs Americans that Obama's early indoctrination in the Quran developed an affinity for Islam, why the Quran is the source of discontent in many countries, and why the Obama foreign policy deception led to poor military action and caused the loss of American lives in Benghazi. Genix provides 36 questions for the Select Committee on Benghazi to validate if Americans are justified to mistrust President Obama and Hillary Clinton. An overview of Obama, Islam, and Benghazi is presented on the website www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Afterlife expert Roberta Grimes was the first one to say that dying can be fun. Now her best-selling book, The Fun of Dying, is available in stores worldwide. So if you wonder whether death ends life, how it feels to die, or what heaven might be like, The Fun of Dying was written for you. And if you have always been afraid of death, or if you worry that your life has no meaning, let The Fun of Dying ease your fears and bring new meaning to your life. Nothing said in The Fun of Dying is based on the teachings of any religion. Instead, Roberta draws on evidence to explain how death happens, how it feels, and what comes next. A lot of the best death-related evidence was produced in the first half of the 20th century. When it is put together with recent discoveries, it tells a consistent and amazing story. Roberta Grimes blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Her wonderful book, The Fun of Dying, is available on Amazon and at stores worldwide wherever books are sold. www.americanminute.com is the website for our guest this hour, William Federer. And Bill, how did how did all the things that St. Patrick did get over here into North America?
Well, 1846, there was an Irish potato famine, and millions of Irish Catholics came to America. Now, the potato was from the Mexican Yucatan Peninsula and was part of the Columbian exchange, along with chocolate and tomatoes and bananas, and it was taken back to Europe, and it was planted and became a great source of carbohydrates and even vitamin C. And Ireland had been a Catholic country mostly, and the British were Anglican, and so they didn't give the rights to the Irish. And one of the ways they had to diminish the Irish landed estates, the people with power, was to pass inheritance laws where when somebody dies, everything had to be divided equally amongst their kids. And so this took the powerful people in Ireland and gradually divided up their estates. And so the Irish wound up with these little small farms. And the potato was the most economical thing to grow in small farms. Well, when this 1846 potato famine hit, nobody had food. Millions died. Millions came to America. They said if you were to put a cross in the ocean where an Irish guy was pushed overboard, having died on board, there'd be a complete string of crosses from Ireland to New York and Boston. And anyway, they come to America. Now, in Europe, in the British Commonwealth, it didn't matter how many millions of Irish there were, they didn't have political representation. It wasn't until their movement with Daniel O'Connell that Catholics got a voice there. But so their numbers didn't mean anything. But when they came to America, the population in New York, for example, New York City, within 10 years, it became 50% Irish Catholic. In 1776, 98% of people in America were Protestant. 98%, little less than 2% Catholic, and 0.1% were Jewish. Mm-hmm. And but with this Irish potato famine, the Catholic percentage went from 2% to 20% in 10 years. And there were so many Irish coming over that there was a large anti-Irish, anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic backlash. And people would put signs in the window, "No Irish need apply." You can read the history. They would call the Irish the white, and then they would say the N-word. They would say the African American is white on the outside, but the Irish is black on the inside, and so they were live in their ghetto neighborhoods and so forth. Well, they began to have parades, and in New York, when they had their first parade and 15,000 Irish show up, the politicians say, you know what? They've not decided what party to belong to yet, and so the Democrat politicians began to march in the parades, and lo and behold, their numbers, though they didn't matter how many numbers there were over in the Britain, their numbers meant political clout here. And so their parade turned into an event that allowed them to rise in status because of their numbers meaning political clout.
Hey, Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always great talking to you. And to you and yours, a very happy St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, well, happy St. Patrick's to you, Rob, and to all the X-Zone listeners.
All right, that's our guest this hour, X-Zone Nation, William J. Federer, AmericanMinute.com. I'll be back after the news. Don't go away.